evening, everybody, and welcome to the Metal Magdalene with Jet right here on Metal Messiah Radio. Tonight, as our guest, we have Pahl Hodgson of the Australian metal band Oath of Damnation. Welcome to the show, Pahl.
G'day, Metal Messiah. Hey, it's still very late.
I was just going to say, I just wanted everybody to know that it's like 5 o'clock in the morning over there, so we are waking up with Pahl. Sounds like a morning show.
Yeah, I am fueling with caffeine as we speak. Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, Pahl, before we get into the interview, many of us stateside have been watching as, all those horrific wildfires spread across Australia, and we all felt so helpless over here. So what's the situation like now over there with all of this?
As far as I'm aware, the worst of it's over. We actually had a really decent amount of rainfall in the last few weeks, and that's really helped actually put a lot of it out. I'm not sure, but there might be some here, like smaller fires still going here and there. But as far as like the whole country burning, I think we're actually past that point now, thankfully. We're all sort of starting to get really sick of breathing in smoke and ash.
Yeah, sure.
Where I am in South Australia, I mean, we had our share of fires, and Kangaroo Island had the worst of it, so as far as I know. But even still, like just the level of smoke that was actually hanging around in the air, it was like going out in the morning and like a fog in the morning or something like that, and like just the smell of the smoke and everything, and the air quality just was really bad for a while. We didn't cop it, thankfully, as bad as some of the eastern states did, but like I said, some areas in South Australia, and more particularly in Kangaroo Island, copped a lot of it, and the aftermath looks pretty grim. But thankfully, we're actually sort of past all that now, so we're on top of it, and hopefully we won't have another repeat.
I hope not.
There we go. But,
Well, that's good to know. I mean, we kind of see some of the regrowth already coming back, just from what we see on social media and stuff. But glad you're okay. And the people of Australia are getting back on their feet. And like you said, you're breathing clean air again.
Well, clean as they can get in the cities, I
guess. So we're going to get right into our interview now. So you're also in Shadow Realm as well as Oath of Damnation. So what kind of music were you, or are you influenced by, and how do you incorporate those influences into the writing music for both of those bands, Pahl?
Well, I mean, how can I say this? I am into like a lot of different styles of metal, and I guess one of the reasons of being in multiple bands is to be able to express those interests and influences in their own way, and we tend to sort of write just anything that sort of comes out, and we sort of go, okay, that might be good for Oath, or this is probably better for Shadow Realm, whatever sort of feels right for those kind of bands. I mean, they're both pretty much the same members except for one out of each. So, the three of us are in both bands. But it's just for our love for different styles that we sort of do like to express, and then sort of have different monikers or different projects to express that and carry it on. But anything from like the classic heavy metal style. I mean, I love like all the older classic heavy metal stuff. Even like progressive metal. I know Matt and Con both are very much into the proggy sort of stuff as well, and all three of us really love the extreme side of things as well. The extreme side obviously is more expressed in Oath of Damnation, whereas we can use a little bit more versatility in Shadow Realm. So yeah.
And so how did you develop your vocal style, Pahl?
Well, I've actually been at this for many, many years. I've been doing death metal bands and black metal, sort of black metal styles for a long time, easily 20 plus years. when I was a kid, just like it sort of started coming out by accident. And I was like, oh wow, okay, let's do. I started out playing in bands as a death metal vocalist, sort of maybe influenced by stuff like early Cannibal Corpse and Napalm Death, that more bellowy sort of like rah, kind of grindy sort of vocal style. But yeah, I guess over the years you get to sort of fine tune it, and I even get vocal coaching. I mean, that's more for my clean singing stuff that I do in Shadow Realm, but like learning different techniques has actually sort of helped me sort of hone in and refine the more extreme styles as well. So,
and so
oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say you're before, when I first started to listen to Oath of Damnation, I didn't even know you were in Shadow Realm. And then when I went to go look up that band, I was like, what the hell? They're so... Because I'm like,
I actually get that quite a bit. People are sort of really surprised. It's funny, because I have like groups of friends on both sides of that metal spectrum, or even people just outside of it, people that know me from, in the Shadow Realm sort of thing. They look at Oath and they're like, holy, what the hell, and then vice versa, like people that know me from the years doing death metal and they see me doing the clean stuff, they're sort of like, huh? Scratching their heads going, where'd that come from, kind of thing. But the clean singing stuff, it's probably something I've only been doing maybe for the last 10 years now. So it's not something I've been doing a long time. I've been doing the death metal stuff far, far longer. The clean singing is a bit more sort of a work in progress at this point. But but I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, I love doing it.
Well, it's kind of cool because it makes, at least Oath of Damnation, it makes it kind of more interesting because I don't know, it's like I was telling one of my friends, I'm like, this is not your regular black metal band. I mean, it's still a little bit more sophisticated. You can hear the proggy influences and stuff in there. It just makes it kind of cool. So Paul, give us a little history behind the band, how you got, involved with it. Well, we all know what kind of music you play, and what's the current lineup?
Well, Oath has been going probably roughly around since 2010. Mm-hmm. Both Matt and Con and the old singer who was on the first album, they were actually rehearsing before I came along, and I came along and filled the bass role after that. I think back then it was probably a little bit more black metalish. It was I kind of saw it as like the next step from the previous band that both myself and Matt were in. We were in a band called Dark Lord, mm-hmm. Which was very much more like, still had like, death metal tones, but it was very much more that black metal sound. With Oath, it started out a bit more of that darker black metal, sort of where, taking off sort of where Dark Lord left off. But I guess after a little while, we sort of started leaking, injecting sort of, the other passions of metal, like, death metal and a bit of prog. Like I said, Matt and Con are both into their prog metal. Con actually has a jazz history. He's actually plays jazz music, and he's trained as a jazz drummer. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that stuff's going to come out in what we do as well. I guess that's also what helps sort of give it its bit of uniqueness. So we started back in 2010, and we had a lineup change. Like our previous vocalist, who was also our keyboard player, he ended up calling it a day, and we were sort of wondering what we were going to do, and I ended up taking over the vocal role. It wasn't originally intended, but it just sort of happened that way. And we found another keyboardist, Haymore, who's also in another band called In the Burial. I don't know if you've heard of them mm-hmm. at all. Yeah, they're another sort of black metal influence, death metal influence, a bit more sort of clean sort of singing sort of style as well. And then we started just sort of getting back on track and just doing just playing shows and sort of just finding our way again. And then we decided that it was time to actually, because it was like several years later, and it was a time to start thinking about another album and start writing more music. I think the desire then was to take it to another extreme level than what the first album was. Where the first album was much more sort of like that darker sort of black metal style, still with that sort of heavier tone and a bit of the proggy element. But this one, I think we've sort of kept that, but went for a bit more of a vicious sort of feel about it. So as we stand now, it's myself on bass and vocals, it's Con on drums, Matt, aka Necromancer, on guitar, and we have Haymore on keyboards. And so this is pretty much where we're at now. We're just waiting for this new album to come out, and we'll start devastating some ears.
Well, it's very cool for me, the listener, to hear this musically. Kind of like a sophisticated blackened metal music, because it's really, really dark, but it's not super depressive, like the sound of so many other black metal bands today. So we're here today to talk a little bit about your new album coming out in a few weeks, Fury and Malevolence. It's been, 6 years in between releases. So how has the band progressed since your first release, and how is that progression influenced on the new album? You kind of talked a little bit about that, but now you can talk more about it.
I guess just sort of our mindset on how we wanted to sort of portray ourselves musically has sort of, relaxed a bit. I think maybe we were sort of confining ourselves in a way of a certain mindset. Oh, this is how it needs to be. We can have these little bits in here, but it's got to be this, it's got to be that. I think we've sort of relaxed a little bit from that, which has allowed maybe a bit more of that sort of real harsher and sort of proggy element to sort of creep on through again. I guess just playing together more often helps sort of refine who we are. As far as the songwriting actually goes, that's actually more Matt and Con's department, particularly Matt. He'll have all the riff ideas, and then you'll sort of come together and string it all together, and I'll put my lyrical input and whatever have you after that. But just from playing and refining, just sort of helps shape those songs to sort of become what they are now. There's a couple of tracks on the new album coming out which are actually quite old. One of them actually goes back to the real early days. It's like an old demo version from 2012. But if you were to compare the two, they almost sound like completely different songs. Mm-hmm. I think just sort of playing together more as a unit and sort of just strengthening ourselves as a unit sort of just has helped to sort of sharpen us and sort of take us to where we are now.
Did you have any of this album planned out before going into writing this? I know you said you have a couple of older songs that you put in this, but prior to writing the album, do you be like, okay, we want to do this, we want to do that, or do you just like, here's some songs we wrote, let's put them on the album?
It's probably kind of more like that. I guess there are some ideas that we want to sort of, try out, but however the songs work out, however they turn out, we sort of have like a general idea of like the feeling or the atmosphere of what we want to actually recreate, but as far as how they actually come out, it's sort of more, let's see how this works kind of thing. We had all these songs already pre-written before we went in. Mm-hmm. To record everything, but it is more of a let's try all these ideas and see what happens kind of thing. It's more that than the other. It could work. Sometimes it does. It is a bit different. Sometimes it might be a bit more sort of predetermined on how they evolve. But a lot of it's just sort of on the fly. Let's see how this works. Oh, that feels good. That works good. Let's try this. Let's try that. And eventually that's how the songs actually evolve and take shape.
And as far as lyrical content goes, what subject matters do you touch on in this album?
It does vary a little bit. It goes anything from like a horror influence to maybe lending a little bit from a sci-fi element. I am a little bit of an amateurish comic geek, and some of that sort of does creep into the lyrics as well. Some of it also based on ancient mythology, like Imhulu, for instance, is taken from the creation epic, the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. Imhulu is actually the name of a wind weapon that was used by Marduk in the slaying of Tiamat, as the story goes in the creation epic. Other influences would be from historical contexts, like Ardenti Hereticus, which was sort of a journey from my comic geekdom, originally sort of basing it on this character called Thomas de Torquemada, who was the ruler of the Termite Empire in a comic strip called From Nemesis the Warlock. But then I started doing a bit of reading on his namesake, which was the real Thomas de Torquemada, and then looking into the Inquisitions, the Auto de Fe, and all that kind of thing, and that's where sort of all that sprang up. And other things as well, just maybe even some more real artistic license and made up sort of stuff, just sort of whatever sort of helps create the mood.
How long did it take for you guys to record this album? Because to listen to it just seems so musically involved.
It was a bit of a spread out process. I mean, it's not like we just went into the studio and were there for however many days or weeks it took to, from start to finish. It was actually spread out over the several months over last year. But as far as like everything musically that's on there, I mean, all that was already set. We'd already had everything ready to go by the time we went into the studio. It was just a matter of actually laying down the tracks. But the process itself was actually fairly drawn out. It was just a matter of time, really, whenever we could actually take some time from our daily grind to go in there and build them all out.
And a lot of black metal bands bring a lot of imagery to their stage presence. What do you guys do as far as live performances?
Well, we used to do that. We used to have a bit more of a get-up. I used to have like this, sort of monk sort of hood thing with a mask and all that kind of stuff. But we decided to tone it down a little bit, just sort of be a little bit more ourselves. It made things a lot freer and easier. And it was also, just with me with the mask and everything, it was kind of like a wall between myself and the crowd, which I wanted to remove. So, I mean, we wouldn't mind sort of bringing some more theatrical elements back in over time, but I think we much prefer sort of to be more ourselves, just so we can actually just be comfortable and just executing the songs, and also just reaching out and sort of touching the audience too.
So tell us a little bit about the album art and the artist.
Okay, it was a piece that was already drawn. I actually found it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right here, so sorry. It's Jenglot Hitam. He's based in Indonesia. This guy is an artistic machine. He just pumps them out constantly. Like, if you look into his back catalogue, there is just so much material out there. And he's actually done a lot of stuff for a lot of bands too. But I came across it and I was just like, dude, how much for this one, kind of thing. I was really, really, really taken to it, and it really fit.
It does, yeah.
It really fit thematically to one of the songs that we already had, which was With Fire and Malevolence, which lyrically it's sort of, your classic sort of War in the Heaven
right
sort of scenario. And that particular image was just screaming that song to me. So I was lucky enough to actually grab it. And it's a really, really cool piece.
And now, do you have a favorite song off the album?
It's hard to say. I'd probably think I Curse Thee, O Lord. I mean, it's overall just vicious, but it still has a bit more of that more atmospheric thing to it as well. That and maybe Ardenti Hereticus as well.
Yeah, I like that one too.
It's more of an epic sort of style song, as well as having all of the elements, all the flavor. Your atmosphere, your aggression. Yeah, I think those two probably are the real standouts for me. I mean, I like them all, but those two in particular sort of do pop out more.
So if you were an album reviewer, what kind of review would you give this album, Paul?
Jeez. Toot my own horn here. Let's see. I would say this is something for fans of both black metal and death metal circles. It definitely has elements of both. And they're not sort of shoved together like some mismatched jigsaw puzzle piece either. They do actually flow and work well together. If you're into anything that's on the atmospheric side, you've got it there. If you're anything that's on the really aggressive side, you've got it there. More on the technical proficiency side, there are also elements of that in this album as well. So it's an amalgamation of those three different things. And if you do appreciate something that is musical, but as well as something that's going to tear your head off, then this is the album for you.
Now, I'm a huge fan of intros before the songs kick in, and you guys did not disappoint on that note. So what do you think intros do for songs?
Well, they're there to set the mood, especially if you want to sort of paint a picture in the listener's imagination. How you do that, is purely individual artistic expression. But that's what I think that intros are there to serve. They're there to help sort of paint the mood, maybe even try and sort of convey your particular mindset or your mood onto the listener as well, so they can share that. But what they might actually interpret from that could be their own thing. But definitely, it is something that sort of is meant to shape the mood. To introduce you into what's to come next.
I always like them too, because something big's gonna happen after the intro.
That's right. Yeah,
and it's just kind of fun, and it's like you said, it's kind of like the anticipation before it really kicks in there, and that I've always liked that whole aspect about songs on albums. So of course, you don't do it with every single song, which is nice, but you do it with you maybe wanted to, but I mean it really it flows really, really well. So what formats is this going to be released on?
So far, it's going to be released on CD and tape cassette. There will be a digital version on Bandcamp and maybe some other platforms. I'm not entirely sure which ones yet. But so far 3 formats: digital, CD, and cassette.
And will those be available at your shows?
Yes, they will. Yes, we'll have copies of our own. So when we start playing shows around locally and around Australia as well, we'll have those available on us as well for people to buy.
And what shows you got coming up for this year?
So far, there's only 2, and they're both in our hometown. We have, which is actually our CD launch here in Adelaide. That's on the 21st of March. That's at a place called Jive, which is in Hindley Street in the city of Adelaide. We also have another one that's coming up April 18th, which is part of a big festival called Heavy SA. Now, that's something that's designed to sort of showcase all of the different kinds of heavy metal acts, whether you're classic to your thrash, your glam, your death metal. It covers the whole spectrum, but it's the showcase of South Australian heavy metal talent, and that's what that festival is designed to do. So we're a part of that one as well, and that's April 18th at the Lion Arts Factory.
Well, your record label, Gore House Productions, is kind enough to be giving away a few copies of the CD tonight. And Paul, thank you for coming on the show to tell us a little bit about the band and the new album, and all the best to you all.
Thank you very much for having me, man, and you have a good one. Stay heavy.
And that is perfect.